Hey everyone, I'm Nick Tate. I'm an engineer on the app platform team. I'm going to give it a couple minutes to let people join up, and then we'll get started with a quick demo and a preview of a talk I'm going to be giving next week. Hey, how's it going? Just going to give it a couple more minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll get started. So I'm going to be giving a talk next week, and it's going to be going kind of into a deep dive on the app specification for app platform. But this week I kind of wanted to, give a little teaser, kind of show some of the things we're going to talk about, and hopefully teach you a couple cool tips about the app spec to start with. So I'm going to run through a quick demo so that everyone can kind of see, what we're going to be talking about. And I think the best way to do this demo is to actually run through a simple app creation in the UI, and that really kind of is a good driver for why you'd want to know about the app spec, and kind of leads well into some of the stuff I'm going to start talking about next week as well. So if you've never been on the app platform, this is the main app overview page, and it's a list of all the applications that you have. So right now I'm going to go through the flow of creating, a really simple application. So at the top right corner here, we can click Create App to launch into the creation flow for a new application. And the first thing you have to do is you have to connect your application to, the actual source code. So in this case, I'm going to choose actually a demo app that we can launch. And I'll choose the Golang demo app. This is just a really simple web application. And, it serves like a single route that says hello world. It's pretty bare bones boilerplate, but, it gets a lot of the concepts that we need to talk about across. These are just some settings. You can choose, the name of your app, the region, which branch you're building from. I'm just going to leave it the defaults for the purpose of this demo. It doesn't really affect what we're going to talk about too much. Here, I do want to dive into a couple of these settings, though. So we're going to look at this HTTP port. By default, it's set up to be 8080. But we can actually go ahead and we can change this. So, let's say we wanted to use port 7000, for instance. Now, I already know that this sample demo app is configured to serve based on an environment variable that's set. So we're also going to have to update and add an environment variable called port so that the application actually launches listening on the correct port that we expect. So, if I go ahead and hit next, this is actually going to bring me to the page where I choose the installation size and all that kind of stuff, and I'll launch the app. So, right now our application is going through the build process. A deployment's been spun up. If we go and take a look, you can see the streaming logs. It's actually pulling down the code, compiling the Go modules, all of that kind of stuff, and getting your application ready to run. Now, I already have a pre-made application just to speed up the demo. So I'll jump over to that. And one of the things I want to look at is the components section. So if you've ever been in here, and you can see there's a bunch of different settings, but we can see the environment variable that we set, and we can also see the HTTP port that we had configured previously. Now, let's say, for instance, you wanted to go and you wanted to update that port to listen on a different port. So, you do what you would expect. You'd have to go in, you'd update this port here. Let's just change it back to 8080. And, we'd save that. It would kick off a deployment. Obviously, this isn't going to work because we also need to change the environment variable so that the app's actually listening on that port. And let's go ahead and we'll change this as well. So, you're probably thinking, okay, all I've done is update, the runtime port that the application's listening on. This really shouldn't trigger another build of my application. You would expect it to, reuse the same cache build from, a previous run. And App Platform does support caching, but if we go and take a look at the deployments here, you're going to notice that the latest build's actually going through the building step. And if we go and take a look at the logs and what it's doing, we can see it's actually going and pulling down all of the code and running through the entire compilation process again, even though we changed something that really doesn't affect anything we're doing in the build phase. So this is kind of where the app spec comes in. So I want to jump to the settings page and take a look at the actual app spec for this application. And if you guys haven't seen it before, on the settings page, we do have this section called app spec. It's defined as your app topology is defined by the app spec and can be used to edit advanced settings for your application. And this is really powerful, and this is kind of what we're going to dive into in the talk next week. But let's take a quick preview right now. So I'm going to have to zoom in on this a little bit here. If you take a look at this environment variable that you just set, we can see this interesting property that really wasn't available in the UI, and it's the scope. And right now it's set for run and build time. And you're probably thinking, okay, interesting, build time. That's probably has to do something with why my application started to build again. And you'd be exactly right. By default, all the environment variables are available at both the build and the run deployment phases. So anytime you change this environment variable, even if you're not using it in your build phase, we're not going to be able to know if you're using it or not, but we're just going to detect that changed. And then we have to run the build again, because if you did depend on that environment variable, we would have to redo the whole compilation process for your application to work as you would expect. So there's actually additional scopes you can set. And it's not available through the UI. It might be in the future, it might not, but there's a ton of features like this and a lot more in-depth things that you can do if you're working directly with the core spec and you understand how your application's defined. And it gives you a lot more power and control over the deployment of your application. So if we went and we actually set this to just a run scope and then change that environment variable, then we would see, like, going forward, it would actually skip the build step completely, unless there was something else changed that invalidated the cache. But in this instance, if we were only changing this port, it would use the cache build and it would skip right to the deploy step, saving you minutes on like a deploy for an application, or even longer if you have an application that takes a long time to compile. So the last thing I just wanted to point out, we do have in our documentation, we have a whole app specification reference. And it goes through all of the different fields that you can use in your app spec, and has descriptions about each of them. And this is constantly being updated as we add new features. A lot of times there's features in here that aren't necessarily already available in the UI. And a good example of that is you can already specify a DOCR registry for your deployment source, and you can launch applications based on images in your registry. But that's not available in the UI. It will be soon. But just things like that, and there's a lot of more like advanced user power features that you can take advantage of if you're working directly in the app spec. So that's all I wanted to go through today. We're going to be talking about all of this and a lot more at my talk. It's going to be next Tuesday, December 1st at noon, and you can register in the description. There's a link to register, so please do that. And then always there's tons of great community talks and other developers giving talks and tech talks in the DO community. So take a look. If you're not interested in the talk I'm going to give, there's definitely going to be something that ticks your box and it's something you're interested in watching. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. So we got one question there on the side. If we enable environment variable encryption, Can we use it anywhere as normal, or since it's encrypted, can we not use it as normal? So, he's talking about the type field of an environment variable. So I'll try to see if I can zoom in on this. So in the UI, this is just to show you the corollary. If you were editing a component, you can set this encrypted button on here. And what that is doing under the hood is actually setting that type field on your environment variable and encrypting it. So basically, what this does is it encrypts this variable, at rest in all of our systems, and then only decrypts it once it's injected into the container. So as far as you're concerned, for use in the build and the runtime phases, you'll be able to use it as normal. You're not going to have to worry about it being encrypted. It's just encrypted pretty much everywhere else throughout the chain until it gets to that phase inside the build and the run container. And then the one more question is, he's receiving a build error timeout because he has to install gRPC when he builds the app. Do you know if there's a way to increase this limit of 60 minutes? Right now, we don't have a way to increase that limit of 60 minutes. Definitely if it's becoming an issue, reach out on the general community support and toss out a question. And a lot of the other engineers, if we get more feedback in that area, we might look into configuring the build limit going forward. This is also something that we could potentially look into as a pre-compiled dependency that we put in some of the build packs, but it really depends. But in general, I don't think the builds should take longer than 60 minutes. So if they are, we'll try to look at different ways that we can optimize that and help you out there. Awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions, but please tune in next week. And like I said, it's on Tuesday, December 1st at noon Eastern, and I'm going to be going through. We'll rehash some of this stuff, but we're going to be learning a lot more about the app spec and how it works under the hood.